It was a stormy night, one of those nights when the world feels heavy, when every gust of wind carries a whisper of something dark. The highway stretched endlessly, slick with rain, its silence broken only by the rumble of thunder and the occasional flash of headlights in the distance. At the edge of this forgotten road stood a small, weathered bar. Its neon sign flickered weakly, half the letters broken, the glow barely cutting through the downpour. Inside, the air was warm but heavy, thick with the smell of old wood, spilled beer, and quiet despair. In the farthest corner, away from the jukebox, away from the dartboard where locals had carved their names years ago, sat a man. His posture was unassuming, his presence almost invisible. A simple black jacket draped over his shoulders, his hair slightly damp from the rain. In his hands, an old, worn-out book, its pages yellowed, edges frayed, as if it had lived through as many storms as he had. The man was Keanu Reeves. To the world he was a star, to the tabloids, a mystery. But here he was just another lonely traveler, someone who sought silence in a place no one cared to look. His eyes traced each line of the page slowly, as though he wasn't reading a story, but holding on to it, like an anchor in a restless sea. Outside, the storm raged on, beating against the windows, howling through the cracks. Inside, time seemed to slow. The hum of the old refrigerator, the drip of a leaky pipe, the low murmur of the bartender cleaning glasses, everything faded into background noise. For Keanu, this was peace. But fate had already begun to stir outside that fragile bubble of quiet. The peace inside the bar shattered in an instant. The door slammed open with a violent crash, banging against the wall so hard the bartender flinched. Rain swept in with the intruders, 5 heavy boots stomping across the threshold, dripping, water onto the creaking floorboards. Their laughter was coarse, raw, and laced with cruelty. They were the Iron Wolves gang. Their leather jackets bore the emblem of a snarling wolf, claws tearing through a blood-red circle. These weren't ordinary drunks. They carried the kind of presence that announced trouble long before a word was spoken. The leader walked in first, broad, shoulders, shaved head, a scar cutting across his cheek like a permanent sneer. He scanned the room, his eyes sharp, searching until they landed on the quiet figure in the corner. On Keanu. That was when the cruel smile appeared. The kind of smile that promised nothing good. The bar, moments ago a sanctuary of rain-soaked. Silence now felt like a cage closing in. The gang spread out, claiming space with the arrogance of predators. One slammed a chair aside, another pounded the counter demanding whiskey, while 2 more began circling the room, restless, loud, infecting every corner with their chaos. But their leader didn't move toward the drinks or the dartboard. His gaze was locked on the man with the book. "Hey, Hollywood hero." His voice dripped with mockery, loud enough for everyone to hear. The other bikers stilled, eyes snapping toward the corner as though they'd just been given permission to join. "The hunt." The leader tilted his head, pointing his chin toward the book in Keanu's hands. "What's with the story time? You think you're better than us?" The bar froze. The bartender lowered his eyes, pretending to polish glasses he couldn't see. The single couple near the jukebox stopped mid-sentence, suddenly fascinated with the floor. Even the jukebox seemed to quiet, as though the music itself refused to interrupt what was about to unfold. The silence that followed wasn't peace anymore. It was a fuse, lit, sizzling, moments away from an explosion. The first insult was met with silence. Keanu didn't even look up from his book. That silence enraged them. One of the bikers slammed his palm down on the table, making the glass rattle. Another leaned in too close, his breath thick with alcohol. "Come on, pretty boy, say something." When Keanu still didn't answer, the mocking laughter grew louder, hands shoved at his shoulder. Another biker tipped his beer forward, splashing golden liquid across Keanu's jacket, the foam dripping down his collar. The bar filled with the sound of their howling laughter, chairs scraping as the men circled closer, feeding off each other's cruelty. But Keanu didn't rise, didn't curse, didn't flinch. His calm was the very thing that drove them mad. The leader finally stepped forward, towering over him. His scarred face twisted into a grin that showed no humor at all. He snatched the book from Keanu's hands and flipped it open mockingly. "What's this? Fairy tales? You think stories are going to save you?" He tossed it on the floor, stomping it under his boot. Still, Keanu just looked at him, silent, steady. The room changed. The bikers' laughter became harsher, thinner, like men laughing to drown out a fear they couldn't explain. The bartender froze, mid-motion, glass half-dried in his hand. Every patron held their breath, knowing this wasn't just drunken play anymore. Something dangerous was about to tip, and then silence cracked open with a sound more chilling than thunder. Click! A pistol had been drawn, its cold barrel pressed firmly against Keanu's chest, the metal glistening under the dim yellow lights. Bish. Leader's voice was low, venomous, each word chewed like it tasted of hate. "Read your last page, Hollywood boy, because tonight your story ends." The gang erupted in cheers, banging tables, whooping like vultures circling their prey. But even with death a breath away, Keanu's face didn't change. His heartbeat didn't betray him. The gun pressed harder, the laughter rang louder, and yet in the middle of that chaos, Keanu Reeves remained perfectly still, like a storm waiting to break. But Keanu didn't move. The gun pressed harder into his chest, the leader's finger twitching on the trigger, but Keanu's breathing never changed. He sat there, still as stone, as though the pistol was nothing more than a finger pointed at him. And then, with a slow, deliberate grace, he reached down, not fast, not threatening, and gently closed the book that had fallen into his lap. The faint thud of the cover echoed louder than the gang's jeers. He placed it calmly back on the table, sliding it forward as if marking the end of a chapter. The laughter faltered. His hands, steady, unshaken, rested flat on the table. His head lifted, and for the first time his eyes met theirs. Cold, steady, unblinking. It wasn't anger they saw, not fear, not even defiance. It was something worse, something primal, the look of a man who had walked through fire and survived. A man who had bled, lost, suffered, and come out the other side, with nothing left to fear. The Iron Wolves called themselves predators, kings of the highway, terrors of every roadside town. But in that moment, they felt it, the shift. They were no longer hunters, they were prey. The leader tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out cracked, forced. His finger, once eager on the trigger, hesitated. The others exchanged glances, their earlier bravado dripping away like sweat. The bar itself seemed to hold its breath. Even the storm outside felt distant, muted, as if nature itself was watching. Keanu's gaze swept across them slowly, like a knife tracing their throats without ever touching skin. One by one their grins faltered, the fire in their eyes dimmed, something ancient stirred inside them. An instinct older than pride, the instinct to survive. Not a word had been spoken, not a fist thrown, and yet the balance of power had shifted. Completely. They hadn't realized until too late. The man they had mocked wasn't a traveler, wasn't a victim, wasn't a Hollywood hero out of place. He was something else, something far more dangerous, and the wolves had just cornered a predator. The storm outside roared, wind and rain lashing against the rattling windows. But inside the bar, another storm had just been unleashed. The leader's grin never got the chance to fully form. In a blur of motion, Keanu's hand shot upward, twisting, the gunman's wrist with surgical precision. The pistol discharged with a deafening crack, its bullet burying harmlessly into the ceiling. Dust rained down as the weapon clattered across the floor. Gasps erupted, chairs screeched back, and then Chaos. The first biker lunged forward with a wild swing. Keanu ducked effortlessly, his elbow driving into the man's ribs. A sharp cry escaped the biker's lips before a brutal knee to the gut folded him onto the floor. Another came from behind with a broken bottle, the jagged glass catching the dim light. Keanu seized a chair without looking, swinging it backward. In one fluid motion, wood splintered, glass shattered, and the biker collapsed, clutching his bleeding arm. The bar became a battlefield. A third biker roared, charging with the force of a bull. Keanu sidestepped at the last second, sending the man crashing headfirst into the bar counter. Bottles toppled, shattering across the wood, spilling rivers of whiskey and rum. The bartender dove behind a cabinet, praying silently. The leader recovered, rage burning in his eyes. He threw a vicious punch, but Keanu caught his arm mid-air and twisted. Bones snapped with a sickening crack. The leader screamed, collapsing to his knees, only to be silenced by a cold, precise backhand that sent him sprawling into a table. Two remained, fueled by desperation more than courage. One grabbed a pool cue, swinging wildly. Keanu weaved between the strikes, his movements almost too fast to follow. With a swift kick, he broke the man's knee, then spun, snapping the cue in half across his shoulder. Before the biker could scream, the wooden shard was pressed against his throat, halting him instantly. The last one hesitated. His bravado had vanished, replaced with sheer terror. He swung anyway, a desperate haymaker. Keanu caught the punch, twisted the arm and slammed him face first into the jukebox. The music stuttered, skipped, then died, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and the raging storm outside. And then, silence. Broken glass glittered across the floor. Tables lay overturned, chairs smashed to splinters. The air reeked of sweat, blood, and spilled liquor. One by one, the bikers groaned, crawling on hands and knees, gasping, clutching their broken bones. Their earlier laughter had vanished, replaced by whimpers of pain, muttered pleas for mercy. In the center of the carnage, Keanu stood perfectly still. His chest rose and fell in calm, steady breaths. His eyes, cold and unreadable, scanned the wreckage. By the time the thunder rolled across the sky, the iron wolves were no longer predators. They were broken men, scattered across the floor, praying the storm outside might swallow them whole. The bar was a graveyard of broken wood and shattered glass. The once rowdy laughter of the iron wolves had been replaced with groans, coughs, and the pitiful whimper of men who had thought themselves untouchable. Through it all, Keanu stood in the center of the wreckage, his breathing steady, his eyes calm. Not a single word had been spoken, not a boast, not a threat. Just action, quiet, deliberate, unstoppable. He lowered his gaze to the table where his book still lay. Its cover was wet with spilled beer, its pages wrinkled and torn from being trampled beneath the leader's boot. Slowly, almost reverently, Keanu bent down and picked it up. His hand brushed across the cover, wiping away dust and drops of liquor. As if it were something sacred, he held the book gently, like it mattered more than the chaos that had just torn through the room. The bikers watched him through swollen eyes, too broken to move, too terrified to speak. And then, in a voice so soft it barely carried over the sound of the storm, Keanu whispered, "I just wanted to finish my chapter." The words weren't meant for them. They weren't a warning or a threat or a victory cry. They were simply truth, a reminder that he hadn't come looking for trouble. Trouble had found him, and trouble had lost. He slid the book into his coat, turned, and walked toward the door. Each step echoed through the silent bar, heavy with finality. The broken men parted their gazes, unable to meet his eyes. The bartender remained crouched behind the counter, too stunned to rise. Keanu reached the door and pushed it open. The storm outside greeted him with open arms, wind whipping, his coat, rain lashing against his face, thunder growling overhead. For a moment, his silhouette filled the doorway, framed by lightning, as though the storm itself recognized him. And then he stepped into the night. The door creaked shut behind him, leaving the bar swallowed in silence. The iron wolves lay sprawled. Across the floor, their reputation shattered as thoroughly as the tables around them. They had been kings of the road, predators of the highway. But that night, they became something else, a whispered warning. Because from that day forward, no one spoke of the fight without trembling. No one dared to mock the quiet stranger with the book. His name was spoken only in hushed tones, like the telling of a ghost story. Keanu Reeves, the man who asked for peace, but brought war when peace was denied. And so the legend grew, not of a Hollywood actor in a bar, but of a predator who walked in silence, fought without mercy, and left only storms in his wake. Some said he vanished, into the night. Others swore they saw him on lonely highways, always alone, always reading. But all agreed on one thing. No one ever dared to challenge him again.